Still here, are we? That's how it started. The words slicing through the crisp morning air, delivered with that specific, venomous disbelief that only a Karen recently released from state custody can manage. Deirdre Blackwood, the former queen of Canyon Ridge Estates, stood paralyzed on the asphalt, her eyes wide and bloodshot, staring at my completed home like it was a neon sign reading, "You lost." It had been 18 long months, and every single one of those days I had spent pouring concrete and raising walls and planting things she could never, ever touch. Where she had dreamed of paving over a Japanese garden and placing some tacky imported fountain, my two-story, reclaimed wood masterpiece now stood, perfectly framed by the thriving, unruly native prairie grass I'd cultivated, attracting hummingbirds instead of her scorn. Her hands were gripping her cheap rental car keys, trembling, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I didn't see anger or superiority. I saw fear. Pure, raw fear. Now, I want to know where you stand. Drop a comment if you're Team Justice or Team Redemption, because this story is a deep dive into both. To understand why she looked like she'd seen a ghost, we have to go back 2 years, 3 weeks before Deirdre's carefully constructed world finally imploded. I'm Julian Hayes, a landscape architect who specializes in sustainable design, and I was exactly where I wanted to be. Crouched in the dirt of the last undeveloped lot in Canyon Ridge, a beautiful, sun-drenched half-acre I'd purchased for a song. I knew this land was gold, perfect natural drainage, great soil, killer views, the ideal canvas for my own home. But I wasn't naive. I had spent 6 weeks meticulously reviewing every single page, every single bylaw, every single architectural restriction of the HOA's covenant before signing those papers. I knew, eventually, someone would test me, but I figured I had plenty of time. I was wrong. The sound of expensive leather on concrete, tap, 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 announced her arrival. I looked up and saw Deirdre Blackwood, late 50s, dressed in a blazer the color of dry sand despite the 90-degree heat. Her face was pulled tight, and she clutched that damned clipboard like a weapon. Everything about her screamed unchallenged authority. "Mr. Hayes, I presume," she started, her voice a sickly blend of sugar and passive aggression. "I am Deirdre Blackwood, president of the Canyon Ridge Homeowners Association. I must inform you that the massive, protected red oak on the eastern boundary of your property violates Regulation 7.3, invasive species clearance. You have 48 hours to contact a certified removal service or face immediate fines." She didn't smile, just held the violation notice out for me to read, the ink still glistening. I stood up, brushing the dry soil from my chinos, and looked at the ancient oak, a beauty, easily 50 years old. "That tree, Ms. Blackwood, was here when the community was platted," I replied, keeping my voice steady and low. "I read the entire covenant. There are no restrictions on existing, native vegetation. In fact, Section 4.1 explicitly grandfathers in established landscaping. I made sure of that." Her jaw tightened, just slightly, that tiny muscle twitching by her eye, the only sign that I had caught her out immediately. She flipped through her clipboard aggressively. "The board will review your interpretation," she clipped, dropping the invasive species angle entirely. "In the interim, I note that the temporary fencing around your lot is not an approved color palette. It is 3 shades too bright, and your truck has been parked on the street for 22 minutes, exceeding the 10-minute drop-off window 3 times this week. I will be documenting all of this." And she pulled out her phone, moving with that calculated, territorial precision, snapping photos of everything. A cold wave of recognition hit me. This wasn't about enforcing rules. It was about staking a claim. I'd learned during the title search that the previous owner, an elderly retired professor, had refused to sell to Deirdre multiple times, even turning down huge offers. She wanted the land for her own massive, over-the-top landscape expansion, and she hadn't taken the refusal graciously. My arrival felt, to her, like a personal theft. "I'll send you copies of the covenant sections I cited," I said, pulling out my own phone, making sure she saw me meticulously typing. Deirdre Blackwood, 3:45 p.m., claimed fence violation, covenant contradiction. If she wanted a paper war, I was going to be the master strategist. "And I'll be documenting our conversation, as well, for clarity. The board meets next Tuesday at 7, she stated, making it sound like a federal indictment. "Be there, Mr. Hayes." She turned, her heels clicking rapidly, But I watched her pause, her phone raised, taking one last, possessive photo of my empty lot. That evening, the excitement of building my future home had been replaced by a focused, heavy determination. I wasn't leaving, but I knew I needed an arsenal. I immediately opened a folder labeled Deirdre Blackwood versus Legality and logged every claim, timestamp, and rule reference. More critically, I called my security company and had 4 high-definition cameras installed the very next morning, cloud backup, motion alerts, covering every angle of my property. I told the technician I was worried about equipment theft, which wasn't entirely a lie. But my real concern wasn't theft, it was entitlement. If she wanted a paper trail, I would give her a video archive. The escalation was swift. 4 days after our first meeting, an email hit my inbox at 10:45 p.m. on a Friday. Subject line: Urgent Architectural Review. Meeting, 8:30 a.m. Saturday. No apology, no explanation. This was an ambush. I arrived at the Bland Stucco Community Center 15 minutes early. Deirdre was seated at the head of the table with 2 other passive board members, a man named Howard who nervously adjusted his tie, and an older woman, Patricia, who nodded automatically at everything Deirdre said. There were 3 chairs facing them. Only mine was filled. It was a tribunal, not a meeting. Mr. Hayes, Deirdre began, sliding a printed document, dated yesterday, across the table. The board has decided. The red oak must be removed within 4 days. Your temporary fence must be repainted to match color B14, which is non-negotiable. And we are implementing a zero-tolerance construction restriction. No power tools or deliveries on weekends, effective immediately. $500 fines per occurrence. I scanned the document. The red oak claim now cited line-of-sight obstruction. Color B14 was a completely fabricated code that didn't exist in their handbook. The weekend construction ban directly contradicted Section 9.2, which clearly permitted work until 5 p.m. on Saturdays. Every point was either a lie or a distortion. I opened my tablet. I'd like to address these point by point, I said, my voice deliberately neutral. The oak is protected. There is no B14 color in the covenant's Appendix C, and weekend construction is expressly permitted. I am formally requesting copies of these meeting minutes and the HOA's legal counsel contact information, as I intend to seek immediate legal clarification. Howard squirmed. Patricia remained rigid. Deirdre's jaw muscles worked beneath her skin. The board's interpretation is final, Mr. Hayes, she hissed. But we will table the oak issue for further review. The fence and construction rules stand. You will receive formal notice. Then I must insist on the legal contact information. I countered, not breaking eye contact. Deirdre pushed back her chair. You are being intentionally obstructive, Mr. Hayes. The previous owner was a community fixture. He understood respect for authority. Perhaps Canyon Ridge isn't the right fit for someone more interested in legal wrangling than collaboration. The previous owner refused to sell to you, Ms. Blackwood, I said quietly, the words dropping into the silence like stones. His daughter told me you made 3 offers. All refused. He chose me. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Howard's face went white. Patricia actually shifted in her seat. I had named the monster in the room, the raw, ugly truth of her obsession. The meeting dissolved seconds later, Deirdre marching out without another word, her board members scurrying behind. 2 days later, I was sitting with Dean Whitlock, a specialist in property rights law, laying out the timeline, the documented obsession, and the pattern of fabricated violations. Classic harassment, Ethan, Dean confirmed, flipping through my documentation. She's using procedural abuse driven by personal animosity. She's making legal mistakes, and we're going to use them. Dean drafted a powerful cease and desist letter, documenting every legal contradiction in her demands. That same afternoon, Tom and Linda Cooper, the couple who lived across the street, the ones who had given me the pitying looks, knocked on my construction door. Tom's face, usually creased with smiles, was serious. We have to tell you about Deirdre, Tom began. They told me about the time 6 years ago when Deirdre fined them $1,500 for planting heirloom blue hydrangeas, saying the color clashed with the neighborhood. There was no blue clash regulation. They sold a valuable antique clock to pay the fine because they were exhausted and didn't know they could fight. They confirmed 3 other families had been driven out by her arbitrary, escalating fines. She wants that land, Ethan, Linda said softly. She's not going to stop. I thanked them, added their testimony to my file, and reviewed the security camera feed. I saw the mail truck deliver Dean's certified letter to Deirdre's house. I watched the motion alert pop up. Deirdre on her driveway, ripping open the envelope, her face a mask of escalating rage and then, terrifyingly, determination. The letter hadn't scared her. It had just given her permission to elevate the fight. 11 days later, after Dean had forced her hand by citing covenant laws guaranteeing public address, the community center was packed for the public HOA meeting. I had spent days preparing a comprehensive presentation, a chart showing claimed violation versus actual covenant text, highlighted in bright yellow and blue for maximum clarity. I stood and walked them through it. The protected oak, the non-existent paint code, the weekend rule fabrication. 7 violations cited. 7 violations without legal basis. The room was silent, the residents flipping through their printed packets, their confusion turning into cold anger as they realized they had all been subjected to the same fraud for years. Deirdre tried her masterful deflection. Mr. Hayes is new, she purred, and perhaps doesn't understand the spirit of our regulations. We operate on collective responsibility, not adversarial technicality. I worry this approach undermines the trust we've built. But before her words could land, Tom Cooper stood up, his chair scraping loudly. His voice trembled slightly, but was steady. 6 years ago, Deirdre fined us for our hydrangeas. $1,200. I sold my father's clock to pay it. I checked the rule then. There was no rule. How many others here have paid fines for violations that don't actually exist? The floodgates opened. 3 hands shot up. Then 2 more. Voices rose from the back. She made us remove our koi pond. She fined us for leaving our garage door open too long. The room was a mess of whispered accusations. Deirdre snapped. She stood, voice rising to a shriek. This is exactly what I warned about. Divisiveness. If you want Canyon Ridge to turn into an unregulated mess, then elect a new board. See how quickly property values decline. She was shaking, her face a mottled red. I've given 8 years to this community, protecting your investments, and this is the gratitude I receive. Howard, bless his timid soul, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a vote on the violations against Mr. Hayes, just to clarify the board's position. Deirdre's eyes were daggers, but she had to consent. The result was a landslide. 21 residents voted to dismiss all violations. 4 voted to uphold them. 7 abstained. After the meeting, she found me by my truck. You won a minor battle tonight, she spat, her voice low and dangerous. You think you can turn them against me? You won't last. This land should have been mine. You are not going to keep it. I have a clear title and documented rights. I responded, meeting her gaze. You have imagined authority and a history of abuse. I'm not leaving. I knew that public defeat wasn't the end. It was the trigger. She would make good on her threat. 5 days later, I woke to red and blue lights flashing against my bedroom wall. 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. I pulled on clothes and walked outside to see 2 patrol cars at Deirdre's house. She was on her driveway in a silk robe, gesturing wildly toward a scene of destruction. Detective Max, Kane met me halfway. Mr. Hayes, we're investigating vandalism. Mrs. Blackwood claims someone destroyed 7 decorative urns and spray-painted her garage. She named you as the primary suspect. Deirdre pointed a trembling hand. He harassed me. He threatened me in the parking lot. He's turning the whole community against me. She was convincing, tears streaming down her face. 7 ceramic urns were smashed, and the word fraud was scrawled in black paint across her white garage door. I was home all night working on designs until 3 a.m., I told Detective Kane calmly. My computer logs are verifiable. I also have security cameras covering every angle of my property, including views of her house. I'd be happy to provide the footage. At the police station, Dean and I provided my continuous, timestamped video feed. It proved conclusively that I never left my property. Kane then showed us Deirdre's evidence. A grainy video clip of a hooded figure and a piece of dark fabric she claimed was torn from the perpetrator's clothes. Dean called in a digital forensics expert immediately, who quickly examined the metadata of Deirdre's clip. This file has been edited, the expert stated. The resolution was intentionally degraded, and the timestamp doesn't align with the camera model. Someone tried to make it look like poor quality security footage to hide details. Kane's expression tightened. Deirdre refused to provide her original camera system, claiming the footage had already been overwritten. Convenient. That evening, I did what I did best. I analyzed the data. I spent hours scrubbing through every minute of the past week's footage, searching for anything unusual. And there it was, 7 days before the reported crime, on my camera 3, which faced her house. The timestamp read 11:38 p.m. A figure emerged from Deirdre's garage, wearing a dark hoodie, moving swiftly. The figure walked right up to the line of decorative urns, lifted a heavy tool, and brought it down. Smash, smash, smash. The deliberate, methodical movement was unmistakable. I zoomed in. The build was too slight, too familiar in its rigid posture. Then, for 3 perfect, brilliant seconds, the figure paused, turning slightly to survey the damage, and the glow of her garage security light illuminated the side of her face. It was Deirdre Blackwood. She was destroying her own property, meticulously setting up the crime scene she would report a week later. I called Dean before my hands stopped shaking. 90 minutes later, Dean and a forensic video expert confirmed it. Clear identification, no tampering, unedited, irrefutable. She had crossed the line from petty harassment into criminal fraud, and she had caught herself doing it on camera. We compiled the full case. The staging video, her fraudulent clips metadata, Tom Cooper's statement, her documented land obsession, and the cease and desist letter detailing the pattern of abuse. A 73-page weapon built from her own mistakes. The next morning, we met with Detective Kane. He watched the staging video 3 times, his jaw tight. He compared it side by side with her grainy, manipulated clip. He made a phone call. I'm requesting a warrant to search Mrs. Blackwood's property and seize her original equipment, Kane confirmed, looking directly at me. Combined with your evidence and the pattern of harassment, we have grounds for multiple felony charges. This is going to get ugly, Mr. Hayes, but we have a rock-solid case. 48 hours later, I was on my property when 3 patrol cars, led by Detective Kane, returned. I watched from my lot line as they served the warrant. Deirdre appeared in her doorway, cycling through confusion, outrage, and genuine, naked fear. She tried to shout, but Kane spoke, and her voice cut off. Our eyes met across the lawn. Hers were wide with the shattering realization of her total miscalculation. Mine were steady, unflinching. I didn't smile. I just stood there on my legally purchased, fiercely protected land, holding my design portfolio. The reversal was complete. She had tried to weaponize the law against me, and now the law was dismantling her. The emergency HOA meeting was held 10 days after her arrest. She was out on bail, looking gaunt and defeated. 43 residents packed the center. Deirdre tried one last time to control the narrative. This is a misunderstanding, she insisted, her voice trembling. My attorney will prove the evidence has been misinterpreted. You all know me. Are you really going to believe an edited video over someone who has been your leader for nearly a decade? Dean stood and connected the tablet. On the wall, the crisp, high-definition footage of Deirdre Blackwood, in a dark hoodie, smashing her own planters, played for the entire community. The room gasped. Deirdre's composure shattered. That's not. It's been edited, she shrieked. Dean played it again with the forensic overlay confirming the unedited, verified timestamps. Then, the final, devastating blow. Deirdre slammed her hands on the table, papers flying, her voice ragged and broken. You don't understand. That land was supposed to be mine. I waited 5 years. I deserved that land. And then some kid waltzes in and buys it like it's nothing. She pointed at me, sobbing. He came here and ruined everything. The vandalism was supposed to be small, supposed to make him realize he doesn't belong here. The silence was absolute. She had confessed. Howard, the nervous board member, finally found his authority. I moved to immediately remove Deirdre Blackwood from her position as HOA president and from the board entirely, effective immediately. Every single hand went up. Unanimous. As she passed me, she stopped. I'll never forgive you for this, she whispered. You destroyed my life. I didn't destroy your life, Deirdre, I said quietly. I defended my rights. The consequences are from your choices, not my responses. The trial happened 3 months later. I sat in the gallery, watching her in a badly fitting navy suit. No one from Canyon Ridge came to support her. The evidence, My video, her confession, the pattern of abuse, was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge's sentence was firm: 18 months incarceration, a $5,000 fine, and a permanent ban from serving on any community governance position for 10 years. Outside the courthouse, Dean shook my hand. "How do you feel?" "Relieved," I said, watching the cars pass. "But sad. It never had to be this way. If she had just accepted the land wasn't hers." Justice, I realized, sometimes feels less like triumph and more like the quiet restoration of a balance that should never have been broken. 18 months passed. My house was finished. The native garden was thriving. The old red oak stood tall. The HOA had reformed under new leadership. Tom Cooper was the new president, and they had overhauled the bylaws to prioritize transparency and fairness. I was having coffee on my porch when the sedan pulled into her driveway. She emerged, looking smaller, diminished, her hair completely gray. She unloaded 2 suitcases, carried them inside, and then stood in her driveway, finally looking across the street. The shock was visible. My completed house, my thriving garden, and the professional sign by my mailbox. Hayes Landscape Architecture. But the final blow was the community bulletin board, where my name was now listed under HOA board members with the title Environmental Compliance Officer. I hadn't taken the presidency, but I had taken the role that ensured no one would ever face the arbitrary enforcement I had. A week later, I was trimming the native rosemary when her voice broke the quiet. "You're still here." I straightened, pruning shears in hand. "Yes, I am." She looked defeated. "I was wrong about the vandalism, the violations, all of it. But you destroyed my life." I put down the shears and met her eyes. "I didn't destroy your life, Deirdre. I defended my rights using the same legal system you try to weaponize. The consequences came from your choices, not my response." She nodded once, a tiny, jerking movement of final acknowledgement, and walked back into her silent house. Her isolation was complete, a consequence of confusing authority with ownership. That evening, I hosted the neighborhood barbecue, a new tradition. 30 residents gathered in my yard, laughing, sharing food, enjoying genuine community respect rather than enforced compliance. Power isn't ownership. Deirdre mistook control for entitlement, and what she built on fear collapsed the moment truth surfaced. I looked at my house, at the garden flourishing in the soil she had wanted to claim, and I felt profound peace. This was home, earned, protected, and shared. Justice, when it works, is simply breathing freely in the place that was always rightfully yours. So, tell me, after hearing the full story, do you believe Deirdre Blackwood deserves a chance at redemption within the community, or was the 18-month sentence and the permanent HOA ban the only measure of justice that fit her crimes? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about community battles.